So, Professor Lauren Klerkx is coming from Wageningen University Research. Many of you need no introduction, but I will still do it for those who haven't interacted yet with Lawrence. He is part of the innovation group, and he is a leader in the agricultural innovation systems literature. Thank you, Lawrence, for joining us.
Hello, everyone. So I will talk about how OFE fits with theoretical constructs of agricultural innovation. And just to warn you, it's a little bit of a free reflection, so don't pin me down on correctness or completeness. So when I got this invitation, I could not but think about Farmer First. And Farmer First revisited, and I think we're now in the fourth generation. We talked about it yesterday with Jens Andersen. So I took the freedom to do some creative digital editing, and I already made the new book cover for OFE 2021 or 2022. Are we revisiting this again? And this is not meant in a negative way, because I think we're revisiting it in a very nice way by adding digitalization. So for me, this is also very much about the digitalization of participatory research and innovation, in which we have already a substantial experience, but now we're really adding a new element. And yeah, as you can see with all these logos, yeah, this is a hot topic everywhere. We are now also co-hosted by DigitAg, and I think also Food Agility, which, by the way, also hosts some of these brokers you talked about, I think. But it's happening in all kinds of places, and it's also very important for thinking about the farmer of the future. There's a very nice EU report on that, in which kind of the digital type farmer also has a prominent role. But also agroecology farmers, and as we talked with Veronique, perhaps we will have hybrids. So it's a very exciting space also to think about, how can OFE help shape the farmer of the future. So here, in random order, and also not in order of priority or of importance, I will reflect within my 10 or 15 minutes, so it will be quick, on different concepts. Frugal innovation, digital citizen science, digital twins, socio-cyber-physical systems. Well, you all have the skills to read, so you can look at the list. And I will connect them to some of these elements of OFE. And I must say that I base myself fully on the website. Later on, after I sent my presentation, I got some inside information, and I have hence updated it at the end with a little bit of inside information. I hope Mathilde will not get angry with me that I have revealed the secrets already. So, to start with the first perspective. So, one of these fields which very much links to OFE, and in particular to the farmer-centric, I put a little, what is it, oval or something, it's not even oval, a square with rounded corners around it, links to the field of frugal, inclusive, grassroots, farmer-led innovation. So this is very much this literature about appropriate technology, really real-life context, and very much based on farm assets, but also the resource constraints, so that we don't come up with something which is not feasible at all, and that obviously could happen in experimental settings, which had kind of an ideal laboratory setting. It's also very much about farmer ingenuity and drive, especially concepts such as frugal innovation, which is really making do with what you have, is very much on that you creatively reconfigure resources. And this is something you perhaps could achieve with OFE, but also you could see some risks here, because the digital is very much locked in also by big companies, by startups. So how much ingenuity and kind of adaptation can you put in? That's perhaps also an interesting question. And one of these literatures, which is very much also about inclusive innovation, and one reading, and you can see some publications here. We worked on this with Felix Opola. There's different ways of interpreting inclusive innovation. Is also very much looking at really the marginalized farmers. I don't think that all OFE farmers are marginalized farmers. I think they're front runners, and they're perhaps what we call lead farmers. But inclusive innovation is also about the bottom of the pyramid or marginalized farmers, and that could also be interesting to see how could OFE also work in these contexts. And I have understood the network is spreading, so that probably also will be a goal of the network. And linked to this, you have all kinds of ladders of inclusion. In the end, this is also very well known in participatory research, that you can have different levels of inclusion. And I think OFE is really about partnership, equality, a joint drive, not an expert saying, can I use your farm? So this is also a very high level of inclusion. And this letter is by Richard Hicks, if you want to look that up. So another field is digital citizen science. We all know citizen science has come up as a strong movement. We have the yearly bird counting day in the Netherlands, and then we insert how many different species of bird we have in the garden, and people are doing great stuff with that. But you can obviously also do this in a setting of pest control, soil monitoring. You can make all kinds of photos. So this is about continuous and real-time monitoring, perhaps expert-enabled by setting up certain platforms to do that. And this is about getting these large data sets from real-life settings. And this also leads to a feeling of inclusion and ownership. Well, one could ask, is OFE really citizen science? To some extent, yes, but it's not yet massified. So OFE is also still, perhaps a living lab, a living laboratory, but it is still sort of a laboratory. So one thing could be thinking about how can you kind of democratize that, and this also, to some extent, relates to the scalability. And there has been a really great review by Jetske van de Gevel, together with Jacob van Et, who will speak about this tomorrow. So this is definitely where I at least saw a connection and approaches such as TRICO, ClimOp, we had at Wageningen the Evoca project. And this is also very much about this open approach, open science. Well, another concept I thought about is digital twins and AI-driven innovation management. So increasingly, machine learning leads to quicker iterations and also kind of self-steered experiments. And this has already been captured to some extent in these ideas about digital twins. It's still not a reality, but for some people it's a utopia or a dystopia. You can only sit in your office as a farmer and you don't need to go outside. For some that's horror, and for some that it's fantastic. And the same also goes for innovation management. So in I think the right bottom corner, there's a table from this publication about artificial intelligence and innovation management. And it basically shows that you can have increasing steps in which, in the end, the softwares do the analysis. And that is perhaps still a utopia. But if you want to do that, you also need to think, how do you embed that? And that also relates to the fact that this type of experimentation is also very new for many organizations. And we did some work in New Zealand, and they're really, they're barely grasping this new reality, and that also connects, I think, to this institutional embedding. So how open is an organization for these new ways of working? So that's also a reflection connected to OFE. Then we have another one yet, which is not necessarily an innovation perspective, but more a systems perspective on what are we talking about. So this is the concept of socio-cyber-physical systems. So in the paper of Van de Gevel, they talk about socio-computational systems, this citizen science. So you have social structures, and they're linked to real-life monitoring and computational systems. We have worked on socio-cyber-physical systems. So you have the cyber, the digital component, you have the physical, the experimental component, but you have the social, you have the farmers, you have the researchers, but you also have certain impacts of these researchers. They're embedded in an environment. They have telecouplings. You could say, OFE, it's great, real-life experimentation, but how much energy does it cost to process all that data? Doesn't that kind of neutralize perhaps the beneficial ecological impacts of new types of precision agriculture? So this is a concept which could be relevant for OFE because it can elucidate these interactions between digital technologies, crops, humans, and can then hence help appoint roles and responsibilities. There's a little bit of a roller coaster, I'm very much aware of it, sorry for that. Then another one which has already been mentioned, open innovation and design. So this is very much about getting different people at the table, having an open exchange. Mathilde has talked sufficiently about it, but this is also about the sorts of design OFE enables. So does OFE also enable a good way of farmers and experts to interact? Does it create the right interfaces and user affordances, how you can interact with the tools and with the experiments, so that it really induces co-learning? And here this field of open design could perhaps be of relevance for OFE, and that's why I also put it with the expert-enabled and the co-learning. So you will see that the different concepts touch upon different aspects of OFE. Well, then we get to the next one. The roller coaster continues. And this is about digital agriculture innovation systems. So it was very interesting to hear the previous speakers talk about innovation ecosystems. And obviously that's a very relevant concept. I think it comes more from the business sciences. It's sometimes also about the operational systems you need to make all this work. Agriculture innovation systems comes more from, I think, public policy, but it's very much connected. And basically it makes similar points. We have new partners in. We need to also have a tentative governance. We don't know each other yet. That is something where this idea on agriculture innovation systems and digital agriculture innovation systems can be helpful, because we've started thinking about it. And Julie Ingram and Damien May also wrote a very nice paper about it. It has implications, but we don't understand fully yet what does it do to our innovation systems. And if you talk in terms of what OFE can contribute, people have been thinking about what should innovation systems do to bring about innovation, like guiding the search, knowledge creation, creating legitimacy. There, OFE can contribute to multiple things. It can help guidance of the search, experimentation. It's an open approach, perhaps. It can create legitimacy. It can show this is what we're experimenting on. So in that way, you can link it to innovation systems. But also it may help enact what we call mission-driven innovation. So towards sustainability goals, not just innovation for economic gains, but for a societal goal. And then perhaps the connection with the agroecology hybrid is very relevant. That is a societal mission. Both have more agroecological systems, but also digital. And here OFE also has roles to fulfill. But to make it work, it also has a lot of learning amongst the experts. It needs a lot of learning because, for example, advisors need to be able to interpret it, scientists need to interpret it, to also work with farmers. So a lot of learning on all parties involved. I think I'm almost there. Mathilde, you just wave with flags, stop now. One is on the scaling of innovation. So here you say it should be scalable. And I think this scalable relates to two things. It's the scaling of the approach. So to what extent is the approach scalable? Also, what types of settings do you need for that? That's about the institutional embedding, a very important topic. And there you also need to look beyond the field. You need to look beyond the digital technologies, but how do you create that ecosystem or that innovation system for it? But it's also about the scaling of the new technologies developed on farm, or the new practices through OFE. And there we have some recent thinking on scaling readiness, which is saying you need to go beyond the technology readiness levels. And that can be a trap of OFE, that you create the great technology in that setting. But the farm system is not the only system. So you need to work also on that whole enabling environment. And I think in the morning session that also came a little bit already to the surface. We need to work on that. Otherwise, it also will not be adopted. So this connects to recent work on balanced readiness assessment, where you look at technology assessment, institutional environment assessment, societal acceptation, readiness. And that is, I think, also very relevant work for this scalability aspect. So this is almost the last slide. So OFE can also be seen as a network, and here I started putting in all the new secret information. So OFE is a global network, and that also opens the possibility to have virtual reality, learning from different farms by also connecting that data and perhaps do on-farm virtual field visits, open source sharing and tools. And I made a connection with some things I know beyond also OFE. For example, there's Light Farm, which is an open source, open access agroecology farm management tool developed by a community that could also provide inspiration. There is the Lighthouse Farms network, which is about agroecology farms, not necessarily digital, but they use very nice virtual reality type of tools. So this is also, and I put an editorial I wrote there, a site of investigation, how this really stimulates these innovation ecosystem platforms and how they can also be globally connected. And this is obviously also connected to farm demonstration, in which there has been a lot of recent work and a very nice special issue in the Journal of Agriculture, Education and Extension. Okay, I'm concluding now. Mathilde, I see you look in a worried way. I always suck with timing. I should be partly digitalized and have a built-in timer, become a cyborg. So what I already said, I've presented a rather random and purposeful selection. And OFE seems to link to several elements, and we need further work on that. And the nice thing is that there is already several aspects of this thinking, perhaps with other terms and words in the OFE framework. So yeah, the invitation would be, keep on working. And thanks for having me here.